Since Donald Trump announced that he wanted to be the Bitcoin superpower of the world, we can see nation states are tripping over themselves to get into Bitcoin. Donald Trump's Bitcoin warning, I think, has put every nation state on high alert. We can see this week a $504 billion giant in Southeast Asia is pushing to adopt a Bitcoin standard. Then, earlier in the week, a country home to 240 million people appointed a billionaire to be their strategic crypto advisor. And then, just when you thought the week couldn't get any more crazy, obviously most people are aware of the fact that Russia and China has just been exposed to using Bitcoin for international trade. Today we're going to be breaking down which countries you need to be paying attention to and why I think the nation state Bitcoin race is just about to accelerate. So before we talk about Donald Trump, let's talk about the big news that happened this week. Singapore, a $500 billion giant, now has presidential and politicians in the national government pushing to establish a strategic Bitcoin reserve. Now, get it, there's a ton of, Bitcoin strategic reserves all around the world. But what's interesting about Singapore is the CEO of their largest bank was bullish on Bitcoin in late 2024. He actually said, the large part of my net worth is in one stock. He's talking about Bitcoin. We actually covered this story for you guys in late 2024, but now it appears like maybe, just maybe, the CEO of the largest bank in Singapore is maybe just tapping a couple of politicians on the shoulder and saying, look, you need to be paying attention to what Donald Trump is doing in America. You need to be paying attention because we don't want to get left behind. These nation states are really suffering from a lot of FOMO. Singapore's DBS Bank to launch Bitcoin and crypto options for institutions. Again, this is massive. This is huge. This is something we covered for you guys as soon as it broke. But they are not the only nation state making a little bit of a strategic pivot into Bitcoin. I don't know if you guys saw it or not, but Pakistan's central bank is exploring mining Bitcoin with excess electricity. And here's a kicker. They did, as I mentioned in the introduction, actually appoint the CEO of Binance, billionaire CZ himself, as their very own strategic crypto advisor for the country. Again, this is pretty big news. A lot of people will say, look, CZ, he's a bit of a shitcoiner. Can we trust him? Well, again, Donald Trump appointed David Sachs. At the time, I think a lot of people, myself included, were, let's just call it what it is, a little bit skeptical. I was certainly skeptical of David Sachs. Don't get me wrong. But who knows? Maybe he can do good things for the country of Pakistan. That is, of course, CZ. As you guys can see from this video, CZ is signing all the paperwork. He's dotting all the I's. He's dotting all the T's, crossing the T's, sorry. And he is now, right now, Pakistan's strategic crypto advisor. Again, Pakistan's a huge country, 240 million people of population, $300 billion GDP. Singapore, again, they are also not a tiny country. They've got a lazy $500 billion GDP. They're massive, they're huge. And they're not the only huge players, not only thinking about mining Bitcoin with excess electricity, but just openly adopting Bitcoin. Again, Pakistan, as I like to reinforce with you guys, they've adopted Bitcoin at the grassroots level. Pakistan's among the top countries for crypto adoption with 20 million users. That's a lot of people. I actually think the real number of adoption in Pakistan's actually so much higher than that. When we really start to dive into the numbers here, you'll be able to see that adoption could be even bigger than what we estimated. If you look at some of the biggest countries across Asia, Europe, in regards to adoption, we can see Pakistan is in the top 10. Again, big, interesting. Have a look at how rapidly the adoption in Pakistan is growing. It is going absolutely exponential as we talk right now today in early 2025. But I think they're not the only giants who, of course, have, let's just call it what it is, welcomed Bitcoin with open arms this week. because we can see it's been exposed earlier in the week that Russia and China have been exposed for settling trade in Bitcoin. Russia and China use Bitcoin to circumvent sanctions in oil trades. No, I'm not joking. I didn't slip up. That's actually happening. Vanek, a massive multi-trillion-dollar money manager, actually confirmed that for us earlier in the week. And I'm not going to rehash that entire news in depth today because I'm going to do that in a future video. Again, the 700 of you guys on this live stream are getting a little bit of a secret sauce, the inside scoop. But something that I think is really interesting is these countries who are adopting Bitcoin early in a big way today, have a look at the price of Bitcoin in their local currency. They're not power laws. So I wrote this tweet. This is way back in 2024. I wanted to bring it back to your attention today because I mentioned Pakistan in it. But we can see the power law has already broken for all of these countries around the world. Pakistan, home to 240 million people. Nigeria, home to 220 million people. Turkey, 85 million people per population. And Sudan and Ghana, both with 34 and 48 million person populations. This is something I just wanted to highlight, that I think a lot of people think these traditional models are going to last forever, but they're not. Have a look at the chart on screen. That's the chart of Bitcoin in the Nigerian Naira. Again, 220 million people use this currency. Bitcoin is, well, not a power law, okay? As simple as that. And I do think this is something to just keep an eye on. If we even, I would love to try to pull up, I can't find Bitcoin in Pakistani rupees. Maybe I can. But again, this is like, I really do think that watching what's happening in these emerging markets can be a little bit of a sign for things to come, so to say. And the fact that Bitcoin is not a power law in Pakistan or any of these other countries who are right now aggressively adopting Bitcoin, I think it's something to certainly keep an eye on. And I do think Donald Trump he's changed a lot by sending this Bitcoin warning across the world, telling the world America is going to be the #1 Bitcoin superpower of the entire world. Again, what is this going to do with price? How is this going to tie into the supply shock we've been talking about, where we've just seen the biggest outflow from exchanges since November 2022? This chart still stuns me. I can't believe how big that massive red bar was when Bitcoin dipped below 80K. I think nation states are aggressively buying the dip. I think nation states like Singapore, Pakistan, China, Russia, they are the explanation for why we're seeing so much Bitcoin leave the exchanges last week. Again, bigger than what we saw when Bitcoin dipped below 20K in 2022. This is the biggest outflow in 3 years. It's 2025 right now. Pinch yourself. The FTX blow up was 2 years ago. And since then, we've just seen coins fly out of the exchanges in a bull run, which is relatively unprecedented. So again, if this trend continues, we don't have a ton of time left before we can buy our Bitcoin. Again, maybe our chances to buy Bitcoin under $1 million are rapidly disappearing. I want to run some numbers on that calculation and that scenario in a moment. But again, this is why I always encourage you guys, check out our show sponsors while you still can self-custody your Bitcoin. Go and buy some Bitcoin at the Bitcoin Well and custody it with Stampseed. Again, if you are looking for somewhere to buy your Bitcoin, I always encourage you guys to check out what the Bitcoin Well is doing. They are our partner here on the YouTube channel and Brandon's YouTube channel, Green Candle, because they force you guys to self-custody your Bitcoin by default. And we're massive fans of self-custody. We don't believe you own the Bitcoin unless you take self-custody of your Bitcoin, which is why we're such massive fans of what the Bitcoin Well is doing, okay? So whether you're a retail pleb looking for somewhere safe and secure to send your family and friend members, or whether you are a high net worth individual looking to buy Bitcoin over the counter, very tight fees, very tight spreads, low fees, we recommend what the Bitcoin Well is doing. They have a service for anyone who needs to get started on their Bitcoin buying journeys. We highly encourage you to check them out. Once you've bought the Bitcoin at the Bitcoin Well, I also always encourage you guys to check out what Stampseed is doing. Yes, it's essential that you put your Bitcoin in a hardware wallet. That's the most important step in Bitcoin. The second most important step that you can take when you self-custody your Bitcoin is writing down your 12 or 24 words. That is your Bitcoin. That's your Bitcoin private keys onto something that's not actually life proof. Okay, I always encourage you guys, don't write down your Bitcoin backup words on paper. It's terrible. Put them on something like this. These are the titanium plates that Stampseed make. As you can hear, that's real metal, baby, because I think time is really beginning to run out. Why do I say that? What are the numbers and the maths behind that really scare me? Why am I saying now is the time to buy your Bitcoin? Well, let's have a look at this. Last week, I crunched some numbers and I said, okay, 46,000 Bitcoin were bought last week just by public corporations. So again, you can kind of see some of them in this chart. We got Strategy, Blockchain Group, MetaPlanet, GameStop, and others. When you run the numbers, just the public corporations, including mining giants like Marathon raising $2 billion to buy more Bitcoin. When you run the numbers, 46,000 Bitcoin were bought just by the public companies, and there was only 3,150 Bitcoin mined that week. Think about that for a minute. So we saw a deficit of 43,000 coins. If that continues, if what happened last week continues for the next 52 weeks, you got no Bitcoin on exchanges by March 2026. You get about 330 days left before the supply suffocation really hits us in a big way. That's why I'm kind of scared, because again, we're not even talking about nation states in the calculation I just ran. This is purely public corporations. So again, I think now is the time to be aggressively buying Bitcoin. And while we're talking about aggressively doing things, you need to really start thinking about your retirement today, much sooner than I think a lot of people are wanting to think about their retirement. Okay, buy Bitcoin while you can today, get it off the exchanges. Again, I actually recently did a deep dive where I showed that 0.00375 Bitcoin was enough to retire. Again, it's pretty bullish, but it's not as bullish as my most recent interview with George Bodine that I dropped yesterday, where he ran through the numbers for why Bitcoin could hit $240 million. If you're interested in either one of those two videos, once this live stream is finished, I'm going to put a link to both of them somewhere around there. And with all that said, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I've got to run. My flight leaves Cusco in less than 2 hours, and I haven't even packed yet. So I'll see you guys in the next video.